Earth's Mightiest Heroes did a lot to expand their own Marvel universe in the second season of the show, and one of the ways they did this was by following up on Carol Danvers, a character we had originally seen in season 1, and giving her the full title of Miss Marvel. Yeah, she's not Captain Marvel in this show, she's Miss Marvel, which is cool. She's also rocking like her OG Miss Marvel costume, which is something I didn't even really know about until I had recently rewatched the second season, because all of my thought process and memories about Miss Marvel prior to being Captain Marvel were mostly through her alcoholism and that one costume. If you know, you know. And to make it all even more ironic, I'm probably titling this video Captain Marvel because Miss Marvel is more heavily associated with Kamala Khan now, but that's all besides the point. So I want to take a look at Miss Marvel and also formally let you all know this is probably going to be my last Earth's Mightiest Heroes video. Over 1 year of coverage, and I think I've finally hit the end. Which leaves you with a few questions. Wasp Season 2, Hawkeye Season 2, Thor Season 2. I'll just be straight with y'all. I have nothing to add that I didn't already go over in the Season 1 video because they didn't change very much, or I haven't mentioned in another Heroes video. So without further ado, let's talk about Carol Danvers and let's look at her first appearance in the show because I think it helps set up, obviously, the rest of her character, and I low-key skipped it in Season 1. When we first meet Carol, we're introduced quickly to the fact that her and Wasp are pretty close friends, and she spends a majority of the episode playing peacekeeper between Wasp and Hank as the two are sending not-so-subtle shots at each other because Wasp is pissed Hank hasn't asked her out yet. And to be wholeheartedly honest with you, that's the extent of Carol's character throughout this episode. But there's something else we should focus on, and that's the arrival and our first appearance of the Kree. Something that is very integral not only to Carol's character, but it's also integral to like the first half and last half of season 2 of the entire show. Basically, the Kree Armada was scouting out Earth and was using Captain Marvel to do so. A Kree scientist who had been reporting back to the Supreme Intelligence, essentially like the Kree's supreme leader, and was simply trying to explain to it that Earth is not really much of a planet that needs discovering. It's just something you should look at for science, and is trying to downplay its significance as a pivotal piece in the war between Kree and Skrull, something that's very much more prevalent during the second season. But that doesn't end up going so well as they send a literal sentry bot to try and scout out Earth, except this sentry bot is homicidal. Yeah, way to go Marvel, you're clearly doing a great job protecting Earth.
The Kree are one of the galaxy's most ancient civilizations, one of the superpowers. We're at war with another one, the Skrulls. Both empires are looking for strategic footholds to fight the war.
But unfortunately, during the ensuing fight with the Kree's drone that they sent to Earth, Carol ends up getting hurt, which means she's now in the hospital and out of commission, and they still have to deal with what is essentially a walking nuke on planet Earth. One that, if disabled, the Kree would most likely find suspicious, and once again want to set their sights on Earth. See how it gets real complicated real fast? All in all, though, the Avengers fairly easily dispatch of the Kree robot. The Kree seemed to believe that it was mostly Marvel, but really he was just kind of there hanging out, and they did most of the work. But hey, they don't need to know that because, gee, I wouldn't really want another spacefaring civilization to show up to Earth's door and try to conquer them. There could be zero repercussions for this at all, right? Right?
The Kree will be back, and they won't underestimate you Avengers again.
So what now?
Now I go to the Supreme Intelligence, our leader. I make an appeal for Earth's survival. You should prepare for the storm that's coming.
So with the Kree being set up as almost 100% coming back to Earth once again to try and take over them for strategic advantages in war, we're also presented with the fact that Carol Danvers was somehow infected with Kree space energy, which gives her her titular set of superpowers. The next time that we see Carol, this is all the way fast forward into like season 2, she's a part of SWORD, which is basically an intergalactic defense system for Earth that is run by the government, and Carol is working for them, as well as taking up the moniker of Miss Marvel. It's essentially her that we see as the lead-in to the Kree invasion throughout season 1, as well as helping us break into the Skrull invasion, something that we've been privy to almost this entire time, but the Kree showing up to Earth is almost all shown through Miss Marvel. She's essentially being our gateway into the first half of conflict in the show and the last half of conflict in the show. The Kree have come back because they don't exactly believe Captain Marvel that Earth just needs to be studied and or isn't really necessary for strategic advantage in the war between the Skrulls. So they send in Ronan the Accuser to judge the world. Remember when Ronan the Accuser was green? I remember when he was green, but that doesn't really matter and isn't really that important. This is Captain Marvel's first true appearance as a hero in the show.
Rather.
What? What do you mean I called her Captain Marvel? No, I didn't.
Rather.
Well, that's just dumb. Okay, almost every piece of media she's in nowadays is Captain Marvel. I forget that she was Miss Marvel beforehand a lot of the time, all right?
Rather.
Okay, Miss Marvel. You gonna let me get back to my video now?
Rather.
Thank you. Anyways, Marvel has shown up on Earth and is trying to convince Carol to surrender and let Ronan the Accuser do his job, and to hopefully present Earth as once again being weak and not worth any sort of time by the Kree Empire. And that doesn't exactly go over very well because Carol is pretty headstrong, along with the rest of Earth, and nobody's just going to roll over and try to become a part of the Kree Empire, because that has always worked out so well historically for humans. Again, the Skrulls were just so much better suited to taking over Earth and humanity, because the Kree clearly just use brute force and extreme measures to take over planets they want or destroy planets they need destroyed for strategic positions. The Skrulls are all about infiltration, take your face, take your likeness, take your name, and I think that just would work so much better on the human population rather than trying to do all-out war, because I just don't think that would work to the effect that they think it would work, if historical guerrilla warfare hasn't shown that enough already. But that's getting way off topic again.
Rather.
I'm going to ignore that because I definitely cannot repeat what you just said. Not cool. Not cool. Anyways, Captain America starts an intergalactic war with a species that is known for conquering other planets because he's secretly a Skrull and also just really hates the Kree. No surprise there. But in the midst of all of this, we actually get a couple cool looks at Miss Marvel and her power set, and she quickly establishes herself as being one of the powerhouses of the team, especially since Thor is absent for like a majority of the first half of the season. She tends to fill his role as the second powerhouse on the squad, and as well we get to see just how much conviction she has as a character.
If I have to fight you to save your life, I will. You cannot beat Ronan.
You don't know me at all.
And with the successful defeat of the Kree invasion, that including everybody's favorite accuser, Ronan, and everybody's favorite Earth traitor, Captain Marvel, Miss Marvel herself is pretty much at a loss. Somebody she had considered a friend for a very long time and somebody she had worked pretty close with ended up betraying her not once, but twice. That's gotta be rough, man. But like, fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. It's kind of her fault at this point. But anyways, Ronan has pretty much been defeated, and the team is super excited, specifically the Avengers, to have a brand new cosmically powered member. Somebody that can help shoulder the load, especially with Thor being out of the picture, and the team being substantially weaker without him. And while everything seems fine and dandy and happy, the show continues to set up the idea that this is only one part of a massive, large-scale war that will eventually spill out to Earth.
You're a threat. Because of what you've done, the Kree will come in full force.
But with the season being so jam-packed already between the Kree-Skrull invasion, a lot of the plans they have in place, even though Carol is a new character, she doesn't necessarily get a lot of like real character development screen time. She gets a lot of screen time for like helping Jan talk through her issues with Hank again, or just being the powerhouse and muscle. And this episode showcases that really well. This is the Michael Korvac episode, which I haven't spoken about at all because it's like one of those nice little slightly disconnected one-off episodes the show does, where not a lot of character development happens, but rather it's just a fun look at an expanded Marvel universe. Which is hilarious because they chose to use Michael Korvac, an already established existing character in Marvel, and completely make him 100% different from what he is in the comics, and it's hilarious. Like, outside of name, physical appearance, and superpowers, he's a completely different character. I do like the idea of tying him into the whole Kree invasion and being a potential experiment of the Kree. It's all like relatively fun stuff, and the episode itself is quite enjoyable. It also gives us a look at this universe's version of the Guardians of the Galaxy pre-MCU, which is like super cool because prior to the MCU, the Guardians of the Galaxy were fairly niche and they weren't really that looked upon or celebrated. As a matter of fact, they were wildly different than the Guardians that we see today. It's just so nice to see a pre-MCU version where Star-Lord is like this extremely serious dude as relative to like Chris Pratt's version of Star-Lord. Being so for real, like when I was a kid and would watch this episode, I was 100% convinced that Michael Korvac was just Sentry's actual name, because it's really funny, I only knew Sentry from Marvel's Ultimate Alliance 2, and so my entire thought process on the character came from like the video games. And I figured, you know, blonde dude, super cosmic powers, split personality, occasionally like extremely crazy. Oh yeah, that just must totally be Sentry. As for Captain Marvel's role in this episode, she has none. She literally exists to be the muscle and to be the only person on the team that can fight Michael Korvac when he's all powered up, because she's super powerful. It honestly kind of sucks. Like, that's a lot of what her role is throughout this season, outside of the few episodes she gets spotlighted in, which is sucky because I feel like even without her alcoholism storyline, she could have had some great beats that I'll get into talking about a little later. If there's one more thing I want to like really give praise to this episode for, is that despite it being similar to Powerless in the idea that it's not directly connected to any major storylines going on, it still seems to feel like it belongs and in place in the season and is very enjoyable while not building on any new overarching storylines. I thought they hit the balance really well with this episode, and it's also one of the most visually beautiful episodes for me throughout the entire show. I'm a real sucker for space and for that purple aesthetic, if you can't tell with like my channel logo. I very, very much found this episode to be enjoyable and found it to be like a good watch visually. And I would very much recommend like this being a one-off episode you watch to get a feel for the show. But getting back on track, the next actually like important episode for Carol Danvers as a character comes a few episodes later. Once again, she just loves to play the big broody muscle that has the occasional quips. This episode is all about the Skrull invasions, but one of the things I loved about this show was showing the occasional downtime that the team would have. I love and am a big sucker for seeing superheroes outside of just doing their job and outside of just wearing their costumes, even if it's not practical from a budgeting standpoint a lot of the time, to create whole new character models that aren't already in costume. I love seeing things like this. I also love getting insights into Carol's personality, such as her interactions with Hawkeye.
That means she outranks you, old man.
And as a Sword Field Commander, I outrank you back when you did Ops for S.H.I.E.L.D.
This episode in particular specifically establishes her hardline mentality about rules. Most likely coming from her stint in the military, she believes in codes, regulations, and following the rules, you know, despite being a superpowered vigilante, which is breaking the law at all times. But that doesn't matter when you have to follow the rules. Listen, I couldn't tell you how that makes sense. Even with cognitive dissonance being my superpower, I still don't get it. But hey, you know, it's a kid's show, don't think too hard. And obviously, this is also the episode where Iron Man finds out that there is a Skrull potentially on his team, and he needs to be looking out for it. And when Carol is becoming privy to this information, her immediate thoughts are, we must follow procedure involving a Skrull, specifically for the Skrull targets, such as Hawkeye, for example. Man, I can't escape mole plot lines, man. I can't escape it this month. I can't take it anymore. Anyways, she's very much about following law and procedure when it comes to taking Hawkeye in under suspicion.
There are rules, and without them,
You can stuff your rules, Major. I'm not going anywhere with you.
Suspicion with no evidence, and she would be holding this man against his will for what would ultimately amount to be nothing, but that isn't important in the context of this episode. What is important in the context of this episode is the Avengers' complete inability to trust anybody, even the ones within their own ranks. This entire episode begins with a party for Carol Danvers, the idea that she should be celebrated as being a brand new member of the Avengers, as she's only a few episodes deep into her Avengerism. This pretty much all spirals out of control once the Skrull issue becomes a thing. Therefore, no party for Carol, and also no more Avengers, a team that she was very much looking forward to being a part of. She also definitely helped in tearing apart, because she was immediately super hostile to Hawkeye, as though this man has not had to deal with enough being called a traitor 2 seasons in a row. He's just so unlucky. I feel like Carol could have had this semi-decent arc involving the idea that maybe following all rules and protocols and procedures the way she believes they should be followed maybe isn't the best idea. Challenge her worldview a little bit, especially with how fast and loose she plays with protocol, you know, being a vigilante and all of that. But instead of doing any of that, mainly because, do not get me wrong, I love this show. I love the 2nd season of this show. And it did a phenomenal job with Captain America, Iron Man, but it feels like the rest of the cast low-key got shafted in favor of those 2 members of the Avengers, especially in comparison to the 1st season, which felt so much more balanced in the way it handled multiple different characters and their arcs. It's just kind of a little disappointing that Carol didn't have some challenge to her worldview or belief when we see that repeatedly happening to Iron Man and to Captain America. But outside of that, getting back to just following what happens in the episodes, Carol is essentially tricked by a bunch of Skrulls into the idea that the Avengers have never come back from Asgard, which I think is a really cool idea the Skrulls had. Basically, the Avengers never came back to Asgard, and they've been stuck traveling in space this entire time, and so everyone she's met and has been hanging out with have been clones. But they're also dropping subtle hints that they're actually Skrulls, because their information A isn't perfect, and B, they also run into the other T'Challa, and he's very much just more T'Challa than the Skrull could ever wish to be. Again, partly because they run off a database of the collected memories of people they've already captured. No capture of Black Panther equals less memories. Now, obviously, this leads to her not only finding out these guys are the fake ones and taking them out, it also helps that she had radioed in the actual Avengers not too long prior to this battle, and they show up to also help dispel the idea that they're the Skrulls and the Skrulls are not the Avengers that are pretending to be. Gosh, espionage stuff like this gets really confusing to write in my script, and as I sit here and look at what I wrote, it just looks like hell. I need to stop writing these at 3 in the morning. Either way, Carol ends up using this experience and this time fighting the fake Avengers to help unite what is left of the original Avengers. So everybody on Captain America's Avengers team minus Cap, because he's a Skrull, she ends up getting them to unite and hopefully go take on the actual rest of the Skrulls, except for Black Panther, because he has to be dedicated to his nation, and he still doesn't trust the team.
Earth's in trouble. It's our job to save it. That's what Avengers do, right?
And as for her importance in the rest of the Skrull, invasion plotline, it's none. I'm so dead serious, she kind of just plays muscle and or slight comic relief, because she didn't actually have a very strong emotional bond or really any connection with a majority of the Avengers. They wisely spent a lot more time on the connections that were damaged, on the connections that were broken, from Captain America to Iron Man to Hawkeye to Hulk, who's in prison right now. They spent a lot more time on those levels rather than with her in this episode, which makes sense, but at the same time, it's just kind of a little disappointing because Carol's a new character and she pretty much feels sidelined for a majority of the first half of this season, even though it has a lot to do with the Kree-Skrull war, and she's kind of our only connection to the Kree. But getting back on track, Captain America, Thor, and Iron Man, the big trio of this TV show really, show up in force and are able to not only clear the Avengers' name, but also able to absolutely demolish the Kree and Skrull, along with Captain Marvel just continuing to be the muscle of the team. But now that Thor's back, once again, like, her position's kind of a little filled, but since Hulk isn't there, she serves as Muscle 2.0. And with that, the Secret Invasion storyline is closed, and so is Captain Marvel's relevance for like the next 6 or 7 episodes. The next episode she is relevant in is all about 42 and a potential breakout that is going to happen there. And the only reason I really want to talk about this episode is because it's a bit of reconciliation between her and Mar-Vell. Throughout the entirety of her second season appearance, she's just been no more than disappointed and saddened and upset with him. So to have an episode in which she's going to have to work with him and trust him once again was a really, really great idea and concept on paper that just wasn't really executed to the fullest of its potential. This also just gives me an excuse to talk about another episode I have just been skipping over because it hasn't been relevant in any video and would just be fluff. But if this is going to be the last time I do this, I really want to cover some of these episodes that I've skipped because, again, it's one of those episodes where it's like has not a lot of overarching plot relevance, but is one of those fun one-off episodes that I think is done well and doesn't feel completely out of place because of how self-contained it is. The dimension that 42 is in, the prison, is currently under assault by Annihilus, one of the Fantastic Four's villains, if I'm remembering correctly, and he pretty much is sending his swarms and droves of armies to essentially fight everybody at the station because the station has materials and power, and it also, of course, has something that Annihilus wants, i.e. a power source in the middle of a endless nothingness vacuum of antimatter, if I'm remembering correctly. I enjoy superhero supervillain team-ups. It's one of my favorite cliches in comic books, especially when it comes to characters like Carol and like Mar-Vell, who get to have a little moment together during it. But once again, where a lot of things seem to fall short for me is in execution. Carol's character seems to have literally only been there because, oh, we're just gonna, have Thor go away for a couple episodes and we need somebody else to take up that mantle of powerhouse. She almost feels like an afterthought even in episodes that she is in favor of having a heavier focus on Captain America, Thor, and Iron Man, which is what I think the second season does. And despite that, I don't think Thor needs to get another video because not much changes with him. I wanted to talk about Captain Marvel because I thought there would be a lot. I thought there was more than there was, if that makes sense. And to me, that's no more evident than in like the last 3 episodes of the show, specifically the 2 before the finale, which are supposed to be all about the Kree trying to destroy Earth's sun to wipe them off the board completely so the Skrulls can't attempt to take over once again and gain a serious strategic foothold inside of that galaxy. I mean, the entire plot of it takes place around Captain Mar-Vell and the Kree, and yet Carol, despite her attachment to Captain Mar-Vell, feels almost like an afterthought in this entire saga. I mean, outside of one conversation with Captain Mar-Vell that she has in like the midpoint of the first Kree invasion episode, she doesn't talk to this man much more outside of the scene being shown on screen. She doesn't have a lot of interaction with him, and I think that would be a big thing. The show honestly seemed way more focused on Captain Mar-Vell and his connection, which, like, that does kind of make sense because he is the Kree person there, but we treat it as though Carol hadn't been introduced at the same time as him, and as though Carol's character isn't directly tied into Mar-Vell specifically. It's the whole reason she even has superpowers. Now, don't get me wrong, the episodes themselves are extremely cool. It's very clear to me that season 2 had a higher budget, specifically because the action scenes look better, character models look better, and just about everything quality-wise in the show got better, except for how they handle these auxiliary characters. It almost reminds me a little of Young Justice's later seasons, thinking like seasons 3 and 4, where they just had introduced so many characters and refused to shift focus away from some of the characters they had already been focusing on since the first season, for fear of potentially like driving people away, I would guess, so that these extra characters whom we may have come to love in season 2, cough cough Blue Beetle, or cough cough in this show season 1 Hawkeye, get completely sidelined and treated as though they should just be there to make appearances, or as though they're just there to be there. It's honestly disappointing, and I'm really sad that this is how the end of my script is turning out. I was super excited to tackle this show one more time. I was beyond hyped. I was beyond excited. I wanted to do, you know, some fun little tidbits like I did it earlier in the video. Like, I wanted to do some fun things for this video. I wanted to celebrate Earth's Mightiest Heroes because I love this show, and it has done so much for my channel specifically. So it's so sad to me that I have to end it here on a more sour point. Honestly, wish I would have ended it off on that Iron Man video. It was pretty positive, it was exciting, and I had a really good time making it. I have struggled to sit down and record this because I felt like there wasn't much for me to talk about, and somehow I still made it to like over 25 minutes. Jesus. Either way, I love this show. I love EMH. Season 1 helped change my channel in more ways than I could have ever imagined. As I sit here over a year later, I am a year removed from covering this show essentially for the first time. It's been a wild ride. My channel has changed a lot. What I do and how I make these videos has changed a lot, even just from the little graphics I use, which if you're wondering why I don't have any of those in this video, it's because I could not get a decent image of her face, and I'm not gonna have another Jean Grey situation where that title card looked horrible. I still won't forgive myself for doing that. While I may have wanted to have a bigger video, go out bigger, with a big bang, something exciting, at the end of the day, I'm still proud of the products that I've made. I'm still extremely grateful that I got to cover this show. I'm extremely grateful to be covering it right now. I have absolutely come to adore this show more than I thought possible, and boy did I love this show as a kid. Now, when I say this is the end, does it mean that I'll never cover this show ever again? Does Superman stay dead? Does Captain America stay dead? I mean, come on. There is always a chance I might come back and take a look at an episode specifically that I missed. But for the most part, these longer videos, these like 20-minute plus videos on this show, probably won't happen again. This has just been such a cool experience. I, for the second time ever on my channel, have completely, at least I feel like I've done enough to say I've completely covered this show, and I'm fairly happy with myself. So if this is how I'm going to have to say goodbye for now, I'm very appreciative. This is how I get to do it on my terms, thankfully. So once again, thank you all so much for watching and for joining me on this journey. To those of you on YouTube, once again, thank you so much for watching. Your viewership helps me to be able to run this channel, and I appreciate you more than ever. If you want to leave a like, it helps out the channel a lot. You want to sub, it's free. You can always unsubscribe later. If you dislike the video, please leave a dislike and then comment down below letting me know why. Constructive criticism helps me to be a better creator for all of you guys. Finally, I do run a Patreon, link in the description. It's about $1 a month. You can choose to support me or not. Your viewership is more than enough, especially if you've made it all the way to the end of the video. I don't feel like you don't have to give me any more. But if you do, you know, I have Discord access where you can get to hang out with me, get to hang out with more of my like compatriots and the people that like to talk about comic books, movies, TV shows, and all that fun stuff. As well, you'll see these videos early and probably not all marked up by all the anti-copyright stuff I have to do for YouTube. And if you're in the $5 or above tier, I shout your name out at the end of each and every one of my videos. So shout out Metal Monk, shout out Oscar, shout out McGann, shout out eSibbert13, shout out Gabriel Lafonte, Transgers1, Video Gamer 75, Golden Boy 420, Dakota Rawson, Donovan Gomez, and MC Bomb 27. You all are amazing. Hope you all have an absolutely fantastic day.